Okay, so it would seem that I didn't have audio for a chunk of that.
There
I
we go.
wonder, I wonder where I lost the audio. Um, but everyone was very, very kind and just smiled and nodded. Um, okay, so we're putting the idea across that one of the key crucial skills for the corporate security leader of tomorrow is the ability to deal with third parties. Originally, I thought maybe it's the ability to deal with vendors, but I think third parties is crucial because remember, at this event, we're combining third party and customer community, and we're saying that they both need to be in the same room. We both need to have a great debate. Christina, why is this an important topic?
I think third-party relationships is a big part of enterprise security these days. I spent a good part of 3 decades on the supplier side, and I would say the best relationships that I had with clients were true partnerships. And so when you look at it that way, it really changes the focus or the breadth of the relationship, I think, and how it really fits into your overall organization. I think the best place to start from a corporate perspective is always with the end in mind, and re-engineer what it is you need in terms of the goals that you have for your program. So when I think of, from the building perspective, you have your island A, which is all of the pain points that you have in your organization, and then island B is your outcomes or the transformations, or really what it is, the deliverables that you're really tasked to achieve. And the airplane is the between part, and the third party relationships is that airplane. And too many times do corporate programs focus solely on the airplane. You really want to focus on that island B. How are you getting from A to B? And these are tools that you're going to be able to use in order to accomplish those outcomes.
And I like that analogy because um, otherwise we just say, oh, well, it's a vendor, they're an extension of my team. But we don't reflect on maybe our own skills in having to deal with them. Joe, let's come to you. You come from a slightly different perspective. You have many hats, but why is this an important skill? And do you think many companies address it? Do they just say, I don't need skills myself, I just procure the services?
Yeah, I think that is a problem. There is a handoff that happens and a washing of hands, like, oh, this is their liability now. They're handling this. It's not only like if they screw it up, it's their fault, or it's it's a contract. They look at it transactional, and not building a partnership. And when you have people where you outsource so much of your operation to where there's not staff that's trained locally to handle it, when something goes wrong, when all you can do is pick up the phone and call the vendor and wait and sit on your hands, like nothing gets solved quickly that way. And if you don't have operational awareness about your organization and how processes work, what your assets are, where they are, if you can't be, because you've really got to be that hands and that branch into the business. If you're contracting out these other teams, you need people that are technically astute enough to be able to tackle problems with them. They're a partner in this. There's someone you're bringing in with them to help distribute your load, if versus handling everything yourself as one person or handing it off completely. You need to have involvement there, so that you have investment from not only yourself but your partners as well, and nobody's left in the dark. You know what processes go on, you run drills, you make sure that things work correctly so that if in the event you're down on paper, you can recover.
That's right, because even if you just say, aha, I demand more from my service provider in this emergency. Okay, but there's a certain level of preparation you should have put in place, certain level of redundancy, relationship buildings, the ability to navigate that and say, I know it's not in the SLA, but like that's a real world skill. So Michael, let's come to you with this idea. Is this part of the enterprise risk mindset, or is this something else?
It absolutely is. I think that um, that we have to move, and organizations have to move with the relationships with vendors and third parties, that they need to have an enterprise risk perspective. They cannot be too siloed or have tunnel vision on on these particular areas because not only is the handoff important, and for them to see a bigger picture for a greater handoff, and to also understand relationships outside of their direct points of contact in the business. They have to establish those relationships. They have to see risk across beyond just corporate security, cybersecurity, business continuity, resiliency across the board. They have to have that understanding to be able to build those partnerships. And then once those partnerships are built, then you have to have enough of that coming back. So in the instance where that vendor or that third-party relationship is not going to be available to you, especially if you have, using a great example of a cyber attack that's hitting all of these organizations at the same time, we have to be able to fend for ourselves. And so if they're thinking too narrowly without an enterprise risk mindset, then the organization could fall in that same trap.
Which I think is a trap that we're trying and mitigate with a panel such as this by saying, hello, there is in fact a skill that one needs to have dealing with these third parties. It's not just, but I've procured services from them, ergo I should have it. It's not the same. So George, where do you think this skill set could come from? Because it is the real skill knowing what you yourself don't know and how and why you want to do it, procure it externally. And that goes back to some of the previous panels where we talk about the who you're going to call strategy rather than the who you're going to be strategy. But how do you form that, George?
So that's a great question. And I think that one of the best ways that you can look at that is you have to be continually developing your continuing education, understanding exactly what it is, the services that you're farming out, whether you're taking them to a third-party vendor or to a completely different department. The security leader of tomorrow, today, has to have that basic understanding of how everything is just so intertwined these days. There are no more silos. There are no more independent departments. I've worked with quite a few people. It's funny, and there's like, well, that's not how we used to do it, or everything. A good physical security manager has to have a good understanding of cybersecurity, of HR, of business continuity. You have to be that old saying, the jack of all trades. You have to understand, at least have good working knowledge of as much as you possibly can to see how all those pieces of the puzzle fit together with one another.
So do you think that's what business acumen is? And maybe we'll come to you, Christina, because I know you're coaching a lot of business leaders. And often I feel sometimes that HR come up with loads of throwaway phrases and they say, oh, I suppose you need business acumen. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's true. But is what it really is, not everyone going and doing an MBA, but everyone is piecing together the puzzle.
Yes. The answer to your question is yes, because you're a salesperson. You're trying to get people to buy into your ideas of where you're trying to take a program. You're obviously presenting your ideas to your boards and to your C-suites. And I think the biggest thing on those third-party relationships is contract management. So having the ability to make sure that you're putting together good contracts that are structured well, or structured to be successful, and how you're going to measure those. What are the metrics you're going to put in place? How are you going to do the quarterly check-ins to see, where the performance is? Obviously you're measuring some things daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. But those are all important skills. I know we look at it from the risk perspective and the certifications, but I think the big thing is you are a business entity. And you need to approach it that way, because there are outcomes in which you're going to be measured against. And I think those are important things, but the contract is going to be the place to start. If you don't have a contract that's going to set your provider up for success, you're not going to be real happy with the outcomes at the end of the day.
Because as some of the IT sessions earlier will have said, if you have to go back to the SLA, something's gone wrong. But
Yeah, it's gone wrong, but I think that as it's changed and as time has evolved, some of these contracts you need to put in place, some things that may need to be revisited maybe every 6 months. If we looked at the labor market, we've looked at things have happened, you might have to go back and revisit wages or markups or different things like that. So you want to make sure those contracts have the ability to be able to revisit things if you need them to. So it's important, and you're driving that typically in the procurement process. So you have to have enough knowledge about, either, and you talked about that in the last session,
the hard
make sure that you're
conversation.
collaborating with peers.
Yeah, you're collaborating, but you also have that hard conversation. Not afraid to revisit things.
Yeah, set clear expectations as well, so they know what is expected of them in that. I mean, that's what an SLA does. It gives you that starting point to talk about it. Okay, in that hour, in that 2 or 4 day or whatever the SLA is, how much do we expect to be done at that point? Do we expect you to at least just one touch with the customer and how, give us some logs, details or whatever? Or do we expect you to jump in full force within 20 minutes so that, not only, and this is a conversation that you can't have with just you and your vendor. This is a conversation where you, your vendor, your customer, any of these parties involved all have to have an understanding, or you will definitely collide. And you'll have problems where, someone's expectations not met and the customer's upset or you're upset or the vendor's upset. And, to maintain that cohesivity, you got to establish good lines of communication and really, like Christina said, a partnership, not just a contract.
And so if we're looking for this missing skill, I don't know, like it feels a bit difficult to say partnership skills. Like Michael, I mean, what do we want to do? Do we want to get really friendly concierge hotel staff and bring them into security so they're really friendly? That doesn't seem like a good business model because they'd be too
Yeah.
friendly. So what are these partnership skills? How do
Yeah.
we pin them down?
Well, kind of piggyback on my earlier comment about how you need an enterprise risk mindset with your vendor and your third parties, as well as within the business, because bringing that mindset together and having some very difficult conversations, and especially around risk acceptance. So mitigation plus acceptance equals 100%. And the fact is that with cybersecurity, physical security, and all the other maybe tangential security or tangential risks that could factor into the equation, that all has to be factored in. And there has to be a real frank and honest discussion about what can be mitigated and what has to be accepted. And then that has to be, there needs to be an alignment there, and that has to be communicated up to the C-suite and to the stakeholders. And so, no, I don't think it can be skipping through the rainbows with your partnerships. You have to be collaborative, and you have to be, active listeners, but you have to pressure test assumptions and pressure test that ROI calculation and making sure that they're all on the same sheet of music, because there is an enterprise risk acceptance or appetite is oftentimes considered a dirty word. People don't like to talk about it, especially C-suite executives don't like to talk about it. But it needs to be talked about, because as risks grow exponentially, acceptance comes with it.
And I can totally see that, because if you talk about a risk appetite, it sort of alludes to risk actually existing, and then they say, hey, that's why I've given you the ball for security. I don't want to tell you what my appetite is. I think that's important. Mike in the audience suggests having the hard conversations need to be made and no longer ignored or pushed off, which I think is kind of
Absolutely
kind of key. So George, we're searching for this skill, and we spoke before about knowing what you don't know. So are we actually talking about pen testing being the key skill rather than a business skill? It's pen testing to improve this relationship, or?
So pen testing is just another great tool, but I can't say it's not like a crescent wrench in your toolbox. It can have many applications. It's only limited on your imagination on how you use it. It's really hard to pin down one particular skill that is the end all be all. And that's what makes this very difficult when you're getting into this level where you have to be able to build and establish good relationships. It's been said in many panelists, many different discussions today. And it's really hard to just, how do you show that on a resume when you're looking for an applicant? How do you show that as the applicant yourself that you're doing that? How do you find that out from somebody that you might be looking for put in that position? It's really it's really a tough one. And I really do want to say though that everything does come back to building strong relationships and understanding why you're there, what your mission is, what your goal is, and understanding that everybody's on the same team to accomplish that. One of the ways that I've worked with third parties, whether they be a contracted guard force or the local police department, to get their buy-in as well to build those good partnerships. You just have to find that common ground that everybody can agree on, set the expectations up front, and you want everybody. Nobody's going to be as concerned about your business as you are. So you have to like a contracted guard force. The security guards, if you just treat them like they're replaceable, a dime a dozen, then that's exactly what you're going to get out of them. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a contracted guard force or something as a more technical for IT services. You build a good relationship and you make those individuals that are contracted feel like they're actually part of your team, your company, and not just a replaceable number that, they'll go to the wayside and find something else. So to your point, it is to your question, it's very hard to lock that one thing down. There's so many tools that you have to have amassed in your toolbox by the time you reach that level that they all need to be in there to some degree, some type of um, development in there as a professional.
I mean, I have personality trait wise, I try and look for somebody that's just relentlessly curious. Like security mindedness is all about like, why is something out of place? Why is this not working right? What process is broken? How can we streamline this? Hey, that door, we had our sales kickoff a couple months ago, and the day before I noticed that a door was ajar and broken, and I reported it to facilities. The next day, somebody had burglarized the building, and like in the middle of RSA, like I ran through with cops and we caught this guy like rolled himself up under a rug in the stairwell. It was like that mindset of like noticing, hey, this door's open, what that shouldn't be like that, or why am I getting these weird alerts, why is there a traffic spike on this one machine? Like just finding somebody that's, and not just with their one tunnel vision of, hey, this is I do email security and that's it. Like also if they're curious enough to venture out into like helping other departments or people in their teams, or other vendors, or participating in events like this where everyone can share ideas, and like all of us come from different backgrounds, and we're all in the security space, but some of us are clearly military experience before, and some of us are administrative and educational, and all these different key roles and experience that we bring together. We all, at least I think, kind of share in the security space that curiosity of what's going on here? How can I make this better? What can I fix? How can I, make this perfect or get there?
No, I think that's a great point, Joe, that you make about that. And to that, it's when I've worked with the guard forces, whether they're in-house or contracted or just any other aspect of vendors, it's always important that they understand why they're doing what they're doing, not just sitting here checking a
Mission.
badge at a door. Exactly. Yeah. Everybody needs to understand what the overall mission is, and everybody needs to understand the importance of every role that they play, or that every position plays in that, because it's been talked about in the panel before this. Everybody wants to look at the big scenario, the active shooter, the CEO died in a plane crash. usually everybody gets together and those events are taken care of. It's those little ones, it's the daily things, it's the devils in the details, those things that just build up, the little ones that did get ignored over time, and then they turn into bigger problems. And then there's always the question of how did it get this bad?
Christina,
Oh, yeah.
Christina, have you had to coach people who've had the challenge of demonstrating this? Because I can imagine this isn't something that some AI resume bot will sift out. You know, it must be a bit of a challenge.
I think it's a challenge, but I think it's something that's you can manage it through if you have the right attitude and approach to it. And I think the other panelists have just nailed it in terms of some of the ways to do that. I think when you're really trying to leverage the third party relationship, you need to be thinking out of the box too. Like, can you connect with some of their other clients to learn about their programs, what they're doing, or help, maybe somebody there can help mentor you on making a case in front of your C-suite. So I think that there's a lot of ways to leverage the relationship, but it comes back to, again, what's the outcome that you're trying to achieve? And then you're trying to bring everything, align everything to achieve that. But you have to be able to have that creativity. I mean, that we talked about resilience in that last panel, that anti-fragility in terms of being able to really make sure that you as the leader of your program is driving the outcome and utilizing all of these tools to be able to do that. But you're going to have to set the example in that scenario.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, to Christina's comments, I'm a big proponent of folks being able to demonstrate that they can have zealous advocacy, not overzealous advocacy, but can you be a champion for your cause? And the only way you're probably going to be able to do that is that you've put the work in and you have the preparation, but you've also proactively identified risks that maybe many others have not. And so, like, so even if I'm screening candidates, or whether it be a vendor, a third party, or someone to work for me, always looking for those examples where they've kind of exercised their struggle muscle, they've managed conflict, they've pushed against the tide a bit, or they've gone to the fire, and then have been able to come out on the other side, advocated for their position, whether that be more resources or changes in policies or procedures. That to me is something that I'm always kind of looking for to be highlighted when you're looking to establish a new relationship, as opposed to the go along, get along resumes, right? Or interviews that we've all seen that, and seen those examples. And so I think that is, for me, something that kind of sets some folks apart. And frankly, when you're on the other side of the briefing and you feel like that they've made their prep, they've done their preparation, they're advocating for a reasonable position, they're being pragmatic, but at the same time, very tenacious. I think that goes a long way, and I think we should expect that from our vendors just as we would with our own folks.
Luck is where preparation meets opportunity, right?
Yep. And I think everybody I was going to say everyone wants to be a cat from the Aristocats or something, but everyone wants to be that big figure. You know, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. That is good quote. All right, so let's flip it back and come to a type of conclusion, I suppose. Christina, what do you think the vendor or third party wants the end customer to be skilled in? Like, do you think it'd be handy if all end customers had a JD and knew everything about law? Like, maybe not, but what is it that the third party would like the end customer to be better skilled in?
I think it always comes back to communication. It always comes back to just having those open lines of communication and being able to nip the small things in the bud before they grow. I mean, sometimes, we save up things and then we just rehash them over and over and over again. So there has to be that open communication when there's a dissatisfaction, when there are issues where we're not meeting the deliverables in terms of the contract. you've got to be communicating those upfront and having that candidate. It comes back to the relationship, but it's also at all levels within the organization, so that from the frontline officer all the way up to the managers of the program. So I think those skill sets are the biggest ones. I mean, everything else can be overcome in time and obviously with planning. But that communication, that, setting it up from the get-go, from the moment you are, putting your contract out to bid, and managing all the way through the relationships, even to the offboarding of somebody, because it is a small industry. People do come around. Those relationships are cyclical sometimes. And so take as much care on the front end as you take care of on the back end, because it does really, that in time investing, it goes a long way in the, because you're going to get a reputation in terms of how you're going to be managing the program. And the security officers talk, they know the good places to work and the ones where they're not supported.
Good shout, and good, great advice. And it is such a small industry. The amount of people that leave it is actually, from my perspective, kind of small. People stick in it, which I think is really noteworthy. Joe, what's your advice for this skill set of the future?
Yeah, I think just maintaining your, like you said from the outset, like when you're interviewing your vendors and there's someone you want to bring on to a company, is there a culture fit between that team? Like, meet more than just the salesperson. Have the technical director get on, have the actual support people. The guys running the screwdrivers and drills. I want them on the call. I want to talk to them and say, hey, if this situation XYZ happens, how is this process that you deal with it? What happens? What do you expect from us? What do you expect from the customer? And if their culture and their systems fit our business model, because they're a lot like I run firewalls as a service for Nile, and so we tie into various firewall vendors. And in interviewing different partners and how they would work well with us, a lot of what we had to do was decide, okay, is there like one culture with the team? Does everyone work well with us? Is their process similar to ours? Or, if we're shipping devices and stuff, will they configure these ahead of time, or do they expect that to already be done and racked and they just touch them remote? Or do they, what process of this are they used to? And is it the same expectation and level where we set our customers to receive? Or, it's not going to work. You guys have a different process than us. This isn't what you specialize in. Thanks, but no thanks. We'll go somewhere else. Like, you've got to be able to weed that out quickly, but also like do enough due diligence to where this is more than just, you're not just hiring, a vendor. It's not totally transactional. You're making a partner. So you're interviewing everyone you're going to be working with, not just the one person that signs the contract, but the team that's going to deliver it. You need to understand that whole process. You're not interviewing just one person. You're bringing in the company. You're bringing in that whole system and team and process. Like, make sure when you're picking them that there's a real fit there. It'll make everything easier for you down the road, because everyone knows what their job is. They know what their process is. They already know what's expected of them. And, teamwork makes the dream work. So
Like it. And I also like the idea you say, bring the engineers in, bring the widget people in too, because that speaks to more engineer to engineer communication as well that we had on earlier. George, what is your recommendation then? Where does this leave us?
So first of all, I'd like to give credit to Scott Walker for the killing the CEO in the plane crash. That's just such a great one example to use there. Yeah, I did get a message while I was on this panel. Yeah, he said don't do that. It's always a fun one. No, but to your question though, if I was a vendor, a third party contractor, and what would I want from the security manager or from that company? Primarily, I would want them to know what they need, what they want. Why are they coming to me? What exactly are they trying to solve through my services? And when I show up, is it going to be something completely different that they're asking of me? So that's what I would say. I would say that I would want them to have that full understanding of my services, my capabilities, or the problems that they have, or at a minimum, be open to understanding that this is my expertise. You're coming to me for a reason. Maybe, like I said earlier, jack of all trades. Well, maybe now you're talking to the expert in this particular trade. Heed that advice, take that into consideration.
Very good. And there's a famous quote out there, isn't it? Like, candor doesn't equate to accuracy necessarily. So there's always that degree of judgment which you need to employ. And so Michael, where does this then leave us now? We're trying to use this as a skill set that can bind all of the panels from the whole day, and I think it might. But what would your advice be?
So trying to kind of build on some of those expectations from the vendor that we've talked a little bit about. I would have an expectation as a vendor that my client would need to know their business, and they need to know who their stakeholders and their relationships are. So, and then have that ability to work throughout the organization and develop some of those direct relationships, as opposed to having to work through, maybe one or two, singular points of contact. That I would expect the client to know their risks and their weaknesses, and to be honest with the vendor of what they are. You may have some companies that will come in, completely show their belly, and that's great. But then you'll have others that will hold back. I think that the client needs to pave the way for change management, and not leave that up, not leave change management. I was in an organization previously with a huge change management shift, and it was left to the company, or I'm sorry, to the vendor, to navigate that. And that was a huge challenge, that they had to go it alone, and that the company was basically having them be the bad guy. And then also, I think that a handoff plan, it would certainly be expected. And I would be wary of a vendor that would be hesitant to work on a handoff plan, because they in a position now where they want to be relied upon, and they want to be the only option. I think it would score major points with me for a vendor that would develop that handoff plan, versus kind of holding all those cards and holding them hostage, if you will, for continued business. And then Christina brought up certainly a point of communication, free flow of communication. How many vendor client relationships have you seen? Vendor gets brought in, and then the client's not communicating with them, and so now it's a guessing game as to what the needs are, what the work needs to be accomplished. And so those are, I think, some of the kind of the key points I'd look to in that relationship.
Thank you very much. And this is a bit of a tour de force, but a bit of a conclusion as well. So I really appreciate you all coming on and being the final panel. So let's give you a big virtual round of applause. Thank you, Christina, Michael, George, and Joe. I'll put you back in the audience for the wrap up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Pleasure. It's a pleasure as always.
See you soon. And yes, I hope to see many of you in Phoenix in person.